There's a piece of paper in your wallet right now that says it's worth something. But if you really think about it, it's just cotton and ink. No gold behind it, no silver, nothing tangible backing its value except a promise. And yet that promise is so powerful that entire countries will destroy their own economies just to get more of it. The US dollar is the most trusted lie in human history. And the strangest part? It works because everyone agrees to keep believing it. But here's what most people miss. The dollar's power isn't just about belief. It's about architecture, a system built over decades that makes it nearly impossible for the world to function without it. And right now, that system is starting to crack. Let's go back to 1944. World War II is still raging, but the Allies are already planning what comes next. They meet in a small town in New Hampshire called Bretton Woods. 44 countries, one goal. Figure out how global money will work after the war ends. The British show up with their own plan. They want a neutral global currency, something no single country controls. The Americans have a different idea. They walk into that room holding most of the world's gold. Their factories are untouched, their economy is roaring, and they make an offer. We'll tie the dollar to gold, $35 per ounce, fixed, guaranteed, and every other currency can tie itself to the dollar. Stability for everyone, order from chaos. The world says yes, not because they love the idea, because they don't have a choice. For almost 30 years, this system holds. The dollar becomes the backbone of global trade. Countries stockpile dollars to buy oil, machinery, food. If you want to do business internationally, you need dollars. It's that simple. But then, the math stops working. America is printing money to fund the Vietnam War, to build highways and social programs. The amount of dollars in circulation starts to dwarf the amount of gold sitting in Fort Knox. By 1971, France gets suspicious. They start asking for their gold back. Other countries join in. And on August 15, 1971, Richard Nixon goes on television and says something remarkable. He tells the world that the U.S. will no longer exchange dollars for gold. Just like that, the anchor is cut. The dollar is now backed by nothing but the full faith and credit of the United States government. Economists predict chaos. Some expect the dollar to collapse. But the opposite happens. Because the U.S. makes another deal, this time with Saudi Arabia. It's simple and brutal in its elegance. The Saudis will sell oil exclusively in dollars. In exchange, America will provide military protection and buy their debt. Within a few years, every oil-producing nation follows suit. Now, if you're Japan and you need oil, you can't pay in yen. If you're Germany, you can't use marks. You need dollars. And to get dollars, you need to sell something to America or someone who has dollars. The whole world is suddenly locked into a system where they have to earn, hold, and trade in U.S. currency. This is the petrodollar system, and it's maybe the most important economic arrangement you've never heard of. Here's what it does. It creates automatic demand for U.S. dollars. Every country needs a reserve stockpile just to function. They hold those dollars in U.S. Treasury bonds, which means they're essentially lending money to the American government at low interest rates. This allows the U.S. to borrow cheaply, run deficits that would cripple other nations, and export its inflation to the rest of the world. Think about that. When the U.S. prints money, it doesn't just devalue the dollar for Americans, it devalues the savings of every central bank on Earth holding dollar reserves. It's a hidden tax on the entire global economy. And there's nothing anyone can do about it, because the alternative is worse. If you abandon the dollar, you lose access to the global financial system. No easy way to buy energy, no way to clear international transactions. You're essentially isolated. Ask Russia how that feels. But the dollar's dominance goes even deeper. SWIFT, the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. It's the messaging system banks use to send money across borders, and it runs on dollars.
If you get kicked off SWIFT, you're cut off from the world economy. The U.S. doesn't even need to invade anymore. It can just freeze your assets, block your transactions, and watch your economy suffocate. This has happened to Iran, to North Korea, to Russian banks after Ukraine. It's financial warfare, and it only works because the dollar is the default currency of global trade. So why does this matter right now? Because for the first time in 50 years, the system is under real stress. China and Russia are trading oil in yuan and rubles. The BRICS nations are talking about creating their own currency. Saudi Arabia is flirting with accepting yuan for oil. These aren't just symbolic moves, they're fractures in the foundation. And then there's the debt. The U.S. national debt is over $34 trillion. The government pays more in interest annually than it spends on defense. At some point, the world might start asking the uncomfortable question, is the dollar still the safest bet, or is it just the least bad option? Here's the irony. The dollar's power comes from trust, but trust is built on restraint, and for decades, the U.S. has been testing the limits of that restraint, printing trillions during the pandemic, weaponizing the financial system for geopolitical goals, running deficits that would have been unthinkable a generation ago. Every time the U.S. does this, it makes the system work a little less smoothly. It gives other countries a little more reason to look for alternatives. The dollar won't collapse tomorrow. The infrastructure is too deep, the alternatives are too weak, but the cracks are real. And once confidence starts to erode, it's very hard to get back. So what happens if the dollar loses its dominance? America would have to live within its means. Borrowing costs would skyrocket. Imports would get expensive. The ability to project power without direct conflict would vanish. It would be the end of an era. But here's the question no one can answer. If not the dollar, then what? The euro is fragmented. The yuan is controlled by a government that doesn't respect rule of law. Gold can't scale. Bitcoin is too volatile. There's no obvious replacement, which means the world might be stuck with the dollar, not because it's good, but because everything else is worse. And maybe that's the most unsettling part. The global economy is running on a system that everyone knows is flawed, that concentrates power in ways that feel increasingly unfair. But no one can figure out how to replace it without causing a catastrophe. So the dollar remains powerful, trusted, resented, and fragile in ways most people don't see. That piece of paper in your wallet isn't just currency, it's the linchpin of a system that could unravel faster than anyone expects. And when it does, we'll all find out what money really means when the world stops agreeing on the answer.